Today I'm going to talk about how we choose the fluence to treat hair using lasers or IPLs according to the colour of the hair and what the importance of the colour of the skin is too. So when we look at a pale skin colour, which most people refer to as Fitzpatrick 1, what we're actually discussing is the concentration of melanin in the hair. Now, for a pale skin, that can be somewhere between about 5 and 10%, so very low concentration. When you look at a darker skin, which you might call Fitzpatrick 6, for example, then the concentration can be in excess of 40%. Typically what you find then is that not only do you have many more melanin targets for the Laser-IPL light energy, but those targets are spread over a much wider, much larger volume compared to the light-coloured hair. This is because a lot of the melanin granules will migrate through the epidermis up towards the surface. So darker skins have a lot more melanin and they're much more distributed throughout the epidermal layers compared to a light-coloured skin. So what happens then when we fire light energy at these different skin colours? Well, for a very pale skin that might only have 5 to 10% of melanin concentration, you're going to get a very minimal amount of absorption in that melanin because there's just not much target there at all. That will result in a relatively small temperature rise because the temperature rise is directly dependent on the concentration of melanin and the fluence. And that means that most of the light energy will just go straight through the basal layer and go into the dermis and therefore will be available for the hair follicles. If you fire the same fluence at a darker skin, which has got a much greater concentration, say 40%, then what happens now is you've got much more absorption in that layer, in the epidermal layer, which means you're going to get a higher temperature rise, which means that less energy is available to reach the follicles in the dermis because a greater chunk of that energy will have been lost in the epidermal melanin. What happens now is, because you've got higher temperatures in the epidermis, the client is going to feel more pain. These little blue squiggly lines here with the nice little ovals at the top, these represent the pain receptors, the thermal pain receptors in the skin. So you can see that on the left hand side, if the 5% epidermal concentration is a relatively low temperature, then the pain receptors aren't really going to trigger too much, whereas with the darker skin, with a 40% concentration, with the same fluence at the skin surface, you'll definitely get more pain, simply because there's a much greater temperature rise in the epidermis in the darker skin. So dark skins have higher concentrations of melanin, and that leads to higher absorption, which leads to higher temperature rises in the epidermis. Dark skin, high temperatures, higher fluences also lead to high temperatures. So if you're increasing the fluence on a darker skin, then you'll get more of a temperature rise there and potentially more pain. So this means we need to apply more cooling when you're looking at darker skins and or higher fluences, because both of these will result in higher temperatures in the epidermis. The reality is that the pain felt during laser hair removal, or IPL, is caused by the heating of the epidermal melanin, not the hair. The temperature contribution from the hair is not that significant compared to the epidermal melanin. That's where the pain's coming from. And we can control that level of pain by applying sufficient surface cooling. So when treating hair with laser or IPL light energy, always stick to darker hair because the melanin is the target in the hair. That's what we're trying to heat up. If the hair is too lightly coloured, it means that the concentration of melanin is too low, which means there's not enough target there. You choose your fluence according to the depth of the hair follicle. Deep follicles, like you find in underarms and bikini, they require higher fluences than other body areas where the follicles are not so deep. If you don't get enough fluence down to the follicle, you will not kill all the germ cells, and the follicle will likely survive and come back as a finer hair. When it comes to cooling the skin, darker skin contains more melanin, therefore will generate higher temperatures for the same fluence if you use on a light coloured skin. So what that means is you have to use more cooling on darker skins simply to reduce the negative impact of the high temperatures in the epidermis. Lower wavelengths are more strongly absorbed by melanin compared to the higher wavelengths. So for the same fluence, a lower wavelength will generate higher temperatures in the epidermis. So for example, the alexandrite, which is at 755 nanometers, will definitely generate higher temperatures compared with the diode at 808 or 810 nanometers for the same fluence, which will be considerably higher than for the ND-YAG at 1064. So this makes it a little trickier to compare systems. If you're using one laser and then change to a different laser, then the fluences will have a different effect simply because of the wavelength and the absorption in the melanin in the epidermis. So we choose the fluence according to the hair depth, assuming the hair is dark, and we select our cooling according to the skin colour. There's a general myth out there that for darker skins you turn the fluence down. That's just wrong, quite simply wrong. Your fluence is all to do with the hair. You're trying to destroy the germ cells in the hair follicle. So you choose your fluence according to the hair follicle and how deep it is. And like I say, assuming that the hair is dark. You don't choose the fluence according to the skin colour. The skin colour really has no effect on the treatment of the hair, but it has a huge effect on the pain and potential epidermal damage. So you've got to mitigate against that by applying sufficient cooling pre, during and post treatment. However, there does come a point, there is a limit. Some skin colours will simply be just too dark, and it'll be very difficult to cool them sufficiently, particularly for the lower wavelengths. So consequently, we shouldn't really be using, for example, alexandrite, the 755 nanometers, for very dark skins, because cooling this or pre-cooling the skin before you apply it might not be sufficient. So you've got to test. That's the bottom line. Test the wavelength and the fluence in a test patch, and see if you can reduce the pain sensation, etc., sufficiently with proper cooling before and after. Most of the energy that we fire at the skin during these treatments is not being used to destroy the hair follicles. So we have to mitigate against that energy by lots and lots of cooling. Cooling is absolutely critical in these treatments. I hope this helps. It is a little bit confusing, especially as there's a lot of misinformation out there, and a lot of people have been doing these treatments without properly understanding what's actually going on, and as a consequence, they've run into all sorts of difficulties. For more information, have a look at our blog site here, or you can look at my blog site, which is mikemurphyblog.com. Thanks, Bye bye.